everyone, and welcome back to Always Watching. Today I am continuing my coverage for the Tribeca Film Festival with the documentary PIRÓPOLIS, directed by famed Chilean filmmaker Nicolas Molina. If you want to delve deeper into the documentary, please check out my interview with Nicolas in the description box down below. The documentary follows a group of firefighters in Valparaíso, a port city particularly vulnerable to forest fires. The documentary took around 4 years to make. It's incredibly intimate, and it doesn't utilize interviews or narrators to explain to audiences the complexity of the political situation in Chile or the devastating effects these fires are having in different communities. Instead, it just shows us by following a group of firefighters in their everyday lives to really give us insight into what the situation is like on the ground. The documentary also does a phenomenal job of getting as close to the fires as possible, giving audiences a sense of the devastating impact these fires are having in the country. Just in February, Chile experienced the worst forest fires in their history. At its peak, there were around 165 active fires, 4 of them starting at the same time, which led officials to believe that arson may have been involved. And in fact, authorities arrested a firefighter and a forestry worker on suspicion of starting the fire, which killed 137 people. And one of the men arrested was actually employed by the National Forestry Corporation, which is responsible for fighting these fires. And one of the documentary's strengths is that it invites audiences to not just think about these forest fires as purely a natural disaster, but a political one. There are a number of theories in Chile regarding how these fires keep starting, whether or not they're man-made, what are the motivations. And the documentary parallels the political situation in Chile with these forest fires to make this point. Chile is still governed by a constitution that was drawn up by General Pinochet, and although they have come a long way, inequality has actually deepened and social mobility has become increasingly more difficult. The documentary captures the protests and the riots, and filmmakers actually put themselves in the line of fire to really get audiences to feel what the tension is like at the moment in Chile, and tensions are running very high. The reason for these protests are the proposed amendments to Chile's constitution, and many of the amendments being proposed are actually considered far too extreme because they would guarantee environmental and indigenous rights for people. Part of the tension is this conflict between the past and the present. Watching this documentary, it's impossible to analyze these forest fires without taking in the country's history and current political situation. The title of the film actually translates into the land that burns. So many of these areas that are experiencing these insane fires are incredibly susceptible to forest fires. They have always been susceptible. However, the monoculture that is triggering these fires tend to be located in generally poor neighborhoods. And one of the questions the documentary asks is, how does that affect the government's willingness to effectively fight these fires? I came to learn that firefighting is actually not a legitimate profession in Chile. Many of the Chileans who are working for the fire department are actually just volunteers, because when you think about it in America, becoming a firefighter is so difficult. You have to be physically strong. There's just a lot of components that go into it, an insane amount of discipline. There's levels to this. So this is like the worst case scenario. And for some reason, the government has not legitimized the profession to encourage people to go into it and gain some status and influence for themselves. The way the Chilean volunteers are trying to put out these fires is with the help of these French firefighters. So the French and the Chileans work very closely in trying to extinguish these fires. From what we see, the French and the Chileans have a very good working relationship. There doesn't seem to be any hierarchy between them. And the French firefighters that we follow in this film seem very invested, and they care very much about helping the people in this community fight these fires. Chile has a very long history of cooperation with the French. In the documentary, we see that the French are very well adapted to the culture. They speak the language. However, the same cannot be The same cannot be said for the Chileans. They don't speak French. However, watching the documentary, everyone understands each other completely, and that's because of their long history of cooperation. Like, there are certain protocols everyone is just familiar with. So in this context, the language barrier isn't as big of an obstacle. One of the points the documentary makes subliminally is how certain practices are so embedded in Chilean society, and some of them are very beneficial. However, a lot of them are incredibly destructive and disadvantage people. As excited as Chileans are for change, there is still reluctance to completely do away with the old system, and there's a lot of division as to what should replace it. Until a decision is made, these fires are likely to get worse, and the people most affected are those least able to fend against it. So this is a very thought-provoking documentary. It gives viewers a cinematic experience while also shedding light into the complexity of the political situation and environmental situation in Chile. Although it doesn't spoon-feed you, it does give you a lot of food for thought. So you guys let me know what you think, and until next time.